Swivel is, I would say, a new school automation and agentic platform for advertising technology. Um, if you want to use natural language to create an automation in your business to do any task that humans have done in the past, you can do that in Swivel. If you want to use natural language to communicate with your data, if you want to use natural language to optimize a campaign, if you want to use natural language to create yield as a publisher, these are all things you can do in Swivel. And not only can you do them across a singular platform like an ad server or an SSP, but you can do it across multiple platforms. So if you're a seller and you're using 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 platforms in the past, you might have swivel chaired between these platforms. Now you can use a singular platform to interact with these ad platforms via an agent, and you can do that through natural language.
So, Joseph, the idea of AI being pretty much embraced, embedded everywhere is kind of a given, but there's still so much variation in terms of how deeply companies, people are using it. So, what are you seeing in terms of obviously the ad industry?
Well, I think that's interesting insofar as there's a lot of width, right? It's like, okay, well, can AI touch everything, right? And I think now we're starting to see more depth, where it's like, okay, we're touching something maybe inside of a workflow, but instead of doing 50% or 75% of the workflow, maybe you're doing 100% of the workflow, and then maybe even more so, like you're going beyond 100%, like the workflow in the past that you're automating or you're using an agent to do now. In the past, it might have been across a certain portion of your portfolio. Maybe humans were touching every campaign that you're running, and they're doing it every week, right? Well, with an agent or with automation, instead of doing something every week, you can do something every day. Instead of doing something every day, you can do something every hour. Instead of doing something every hour, you could now do it every minute. And then obviously, as you go further and further down that chain, you get to the point where agents or AI or automation can do something in real time, right? Can you decision an impression with an agent as opposed to, kind of like the way it was done in the past? So I think the depth is kind of what I'm seeing is like the future. And then all the way down to the impressionable level, or all the way down to like the millisecond level.
Well, Joseph, let's dive into that, what you're seeing on the impression level a bit more. But in particular, I want to know like how AI is actually changing the way campaigns are planned and optimized at that impression level.
Well, I think a lot of the planning is still similar to what it was in the past. It's just more automated. So if you think about like planning in general, planning is a very human-driven process, or it was a very human-driven process. And I guess kind of today, you might say, okay, well, what were humans doing in the past? Well, first, let's replicate that. Okay. And then after you've replicated it, maybe you want to scale it or make it faster, right? And then after you've made it, you've replicated it, you've made it faster, then it's like, well, let's improve it, right? And then to drive that point home all the way down, like you're saying, to the impression level, well, before you even get to the impression level, there are so much improvements that can be made by taking campaign optimization and just doing it more frequently, or doing it again across like a wider portfolio. I think there are diminishing returns as you have an agent or an automation do something more frequently. But I think, if you take it to its logical conclusion, as you get to the impression level, you have now reached some kind of peak efficiency or peak optimization. But these tasks are tasks that people have been doing in ad ops and campaign management for many years. These are things where in the past, you might have had something like an allow list or a block list, and you're targeting hundreds or thousands of site names or app bundles, and then maybe you had a human come in and you would look at the performance across this portfolio of app names and app bundles. They would look at that list and they would say, out of this 1,000 or 500, these are the top 250. Right? And they'd take that list and they'd remove 250, right? Well, that process might have been done once per campaign. Again, if you take these processes, these workflows that humans have been doing in the past, and then you put an agent on it and you say, hey, do this continuously, right? Well, that allows you to extract incremental value. And I think that's the kind of thing that people are looking for. They're looking for an agent that not just has a hypothetical value, but one that's delivering like a result. That result could be increased campaign performance, increased return on ad spend, or it could be margin based. Your agent could be improving your margin or improving your cost basis by finding impressions at a lower cost.
Joseph, it seems like there's a new level of innovation every other week practically, but I'll just ask for a little bit more down the road sort of a question here. With just want to know what sort of things are exciting you looking say 6 months, a year ahead in terms of Swivel in terms of what AI and its applications can do?
I would say adoption, accuracy, and scale are kind of what I look at for the future. We have tools inside of our platform that are, have never been touched. Not because people, are not using all of the tools, but because there are things that AI platforms can do that people don't know because they've never prompted them to do. In the same way that if you use a large language model today in OpenAI, there are tons of things that you've asked it to do, but then there's an unlimited number of things you've never asked it to do. And so one thing I see is that people will become more expert driven in how they prompt, right? And they will discover new things that they can do. And then from a scale standpoint, I think, the number of people touching these tools today is still, whether it's high or low, the penetration level in any organization is getting deeper and deeper, such that you have engagement from executives all the way down to the lowest level people. In order for people to trust these products, they have to be accurate. And I think the accuracy continues to get better and better. And so I think between those three things, that is the future, is discovering what you can do with the tool accurately is really where we're going.